I had said it as a joke, a half-lawing aside, the kind of throwaway thing a man says to a woman he's been comfortable with for years and means nothing by. "No man will ever tame you, Honor Treadwell," I'd said, leaning on the fence between our two places, watching her tighten a strap on her saddle in the long autumn light. "You've made that good and clear to every fool in the valley. I reckon you'll die a free woman with your own brand on your own stock, and Lord help anyone who tries to hold you any other way." She did not look up at me right away. She finished the buckle and patted the mare's neck and turned her gray eyes on me with an expression I had never seen on her face in 8 years of being her nearest neighbor and her closest friend. And then very quietly she said 3 words that knocked the very breath out of me. "One already has." She swung up into the saddle before I could speak, and she rode away from me down the road toward her own place, and she did not once look back. It took me until somewhere in the middle of that sleepless night to understand what Honor Treadwell had meant. And it took until the cold gray dawn for me to understand that I had been, for the better part of 8 years, the stupidest man in the whole Bear Ridge country. My name is Whit Cleary, and was a quiet bachelor rancher on the lower side of Bear Ridge, with a modest spread, a small herd, and no expectation of ever being anything else. I had not married young, the way most men in our country did, and once a certain age had come and gone, I had simply stopped imagining I ever would. I was not the kind of man women looked at and saw a future in. I was plain, I was quiet. I had nothing remarkable to offer, and I had long since made my peace with that, built my own little place, kept my own counsel, and lived a quiet life that did not require me to ask anything of anyone. The one bright thread that ran through my solitary years was Honor Treadwell. Honor had inherited her father's small ranch on the upper side of Bear Ridge when she was barely a young woman, and she had run it herself, alone, ever since. She'd had no brothers, no other family near, and a remarkable stiff-spined refusal to let any of that defeat her. She had simply taken up the work and done it, year after year, and made of her father's place a quiet, thriving thing through her own labor. She was not large, was Honor, but she was strong in a wiry, enduring way. She was plain in the way I was plain, no great beauty, just a steady, weathered face with steady gray eyes. But there was a quiet dignity to her that you noticed once and never quite forgot. And she had refused, year after year, every man who'd come courting. There had been a fair number of them in her younger days. The valley was full of bachelor ranchers and widowers, and a single woman running her own place was bound to attract suitors. Honor Treadwell had heard them out, everyone, and declined each in turn. Politely at first, then with growing impatience as the years went on. "I am not for marrying," she'd say, plain as that, and send them home. After enough years of it, the valley simply gave up. Honor Treadwell, the talk went, would never marry. She was too independent, too set in her ways too. The word was always the same: untamable. It became one of the settled facts of the country, like the snow on the high peaks or the spring run of the creek. And in all those years, the one person Honor Treadwell did not send away was me. It had started, all those 8 years ago, with the simplest sort of neighborliness. My place sat just below hers, the two of us at the head of a small canyon, and we shared a stretch of disputed fence line and an arrangement to water our stock from the same creek. We worked out the practicalities of being neighbors early on, the two of us, quietly and without fuss, and from there a gradual partnership had grown. I helped her at branding time and through the worst of calving. She came down through a hard winter once when I was laid up with a broken arm and worked my stock alongside her own for 3 weeks without complaint. We took our coffee at one another's kitchen tables most weeks. We talked, when we talked, about cattle and weather and small ordinary things, and sat companionably silent the rest of the time. We were friends in the deep-settled way of two solitary souls who had each found in the other a presence that didn't ask anything of them. And in all those 8 years, I had never once let myself imagine that what I felt for Honor Treadwell could ever, in this world, have been called love. That is the part I am ashamed to write down. But it is the truth, and it deserves to be told plain. I had loved her. I had loved her from somewhere in our second year of knowing each other, the way a quiet man loves slow and deep without quite admitting it to himself. I had loved her steadiness and her plain dignity, the strength of her small, wiry hands, the rare, slow smile she had, the way her gray eyes went thoughtful when she was puzzling at a problem, the way she'd hum to herself when she didn't know I was listening. I had loved every ordinary thing about Honor Treadwell for the better part of 7 years, and I had told myself every single day of that loving that I had no right to so much as breathe a word of it to her. Because what was I, after all? A plain, quiet bachelor on a modest spread, no great catch by any reckoning, and what was she? The fiercely independent woman the whole valley swore would never marry, who had turned down better men than me half a dozen times. To imagine that Honor Treadwell would want me, when she had not wanted any of them, was a piece of foolishness no honest man should permit himself. And worse than the foolishness was the risk. If I spoke and was refused, I would lose what I had. The friendship, the easy presence, the only true human company in my solitary life. I could not bear the thought of losing her. So I had buried what I felt year after year and called it friendship and counted myself lucky for that much. And now I come to the autumn evening of the joke. It had been a long, good day's work, the two of us pushing her last late-season cattle down from the high pasture before the snow came in. We'd finished at her gate near sundown, the air going sharp and the light going gold, and we'd stood a while at the fence line saying the small, unhurried things you say at the end of a satisfying day. Then a wagon came up the road. Old Mose Pickett, the storekeeper from Bear Ridge, bringing Honor the cornmeal she'd ordered, and Mose, being Mose, had not been able to leave well enough alone. He'd handed down the sack with a wink, looked at Honor, looked at me, and said in that knowing way of his, "Miss Honor, you ought to find yourself a husband to fetch your cornmeal and save these poor neighbors the trouble." Honor had given him the small, tight smile she reserved for impertinent storekeepers and said evenly, "I've fetched my own cornmeal 20 years, Mose Pickett. I'll fetch it 20 more." And Mose had laughed and driven off. And I, fool that I was, had heard in his teasing only a chance to defend her, to say the thing the whole valley said, and that I had myself believed for 8 years. So when she came back to the fence to finish her saddle, I leaned my arms on the top rail and said, with the easy half-lying fondness of a longtime friend, "No man'll ever tame you, Honor Treadwell. You've made that good and clear to every fool in the valley. I reckon you'll die a free woman with your own brand on your own stock, and Lord help anyone who tries to hold you any other way." It was meant kindly. I meant it as her champion, in good faith. I meant, heaven help me, to let her know that her oldest friend stood with her and respected her independence, and that I would never be one of those fools who tried to claim her. And what I saw, when she at last lifted her gray eyes to mine, was a thing I had not seen on her face in 8 years of knowing her, a kind of tired sorrow. The look of a woman who has been waiting a very long time for something that has not come, and who in that moment has decided very quietly to stop waiting. "One already has," she said. That was all. 3 words, said low and clear, with her eyes on mine. And before I could draw breath to ask what she meant, before my dim, slow mind could catch up to what she had just said, Honor Treadwell swung up into her saddle and turned the mare's head, and she rode away from me down the road toward her own place. She did not look back, not even once. I stood with my arm still on the fence rail, and I watched her ride out of sight, and I could not understand for the life of me what had just happened. I tell you that I rode home in a daze and ate my cold supper without tasting it, and went to bed not knowing what to think. And I tell you that somewhere in the middle of the sleepless night that followed, with the moonlight crawling slow across the cabin floor, my dim, slow mind at last caught up to what Honor Treadwell had said to me at her fence in the long gold light. "One already has. A man." She had said a man already had tamed her, one man. And she had not been speaking, I understood at last, of any of the suitors she had refused. Honor Treadwell had spent 20 years sending men away. There was, in her whole solitary, careful life, only one man she had let near her. Let near her not for an hour of courting, but for 8 years of suppers and coffee, and shared fences and hard winters. There was only one man she had ever permitted into the daily breathing of her life, and the one man was me. I sat up in my bed in the dark cabin and put my face in my hands because the understanding of it broke me. For 8 years. For 8 quiet years across kitchen tables and along fence lines and through hard calvings and shared coffee. For 8 years, Honor Treadwell had been loving me the way I had been loving her, each of us hiding it from the other, each of us too proud and too afraid and too convinced of our own unworthiness to so much as breathe a word, and we had wasted 8 years of a love we both held just by being too cowardly to speak it. And tonight, finally, the storekeeper had teased her, and I had defended her with a fool's casual joke that told her, oh, what it must have told her, that her oldest friend, the one man she had let near her, saw her as nothing more than the untamable spinster the rest of the valley saw, and was perfectly content with that. I had told the woman I loved that no man would ever tame her, and what she had heard was that the one man who knew her best had no idea, none at all, that for 8 quiet years she had been his, and only waiting for him to notice. She had answered me with the truth at last, because she could not any longer bear the not saying of it. And then she had ridden away because she could not bear to wait to see whether I would understand and what I would do. I did not sleep again that night. I sat at my window and watched the slow turning of the stars. And I thought of every kitchen table and every shared fence and every long companionable silence of 8 years. And I saw them all now for what they had really been, and what they could have been if only one of us had ever found the courage. And before the first gray of the dawn had touched the eastern sky, I was dressed and saddled and riding hard up the road to Honor Treadwell's place. She was already up, she rose early, did honor, I knew that as well as I knew my own habits, and she was at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee in her hands when I came pounding at her door. She opened it and looked at me, and her gray eyes were red-rimmed in a way I had never seen them. And her chin came up the way it did when she was bracing for a hard thing, and she said quietly, "I should not have said what I said yesterday, Whit. It was unfair to you. I have spoiled our friendship and my own composure, and I would be much obliged if we could forget the whole foolish thing and go on as we were." "Honor Treadwell," I said, and my voice was not quite steady. "I have not come up here at dawn to forget what you said. I have come up here at dawn because I have spent the entire night understanding it. And I am the greatest fool that ever drew breath in this valley. And I have something I need to tell you that I should have told you 7 years ago, and have been too cowardly to say." She stood very still in the doorway. "For 8 years," I said, "I have loved you. I have loved you from somewhere in our second year of knowing each other, and I have not said one word about it, because I am a plain, quiet man with nothing to offer, and I could not bear to imagine you would want me when you had not wanted any of the better men who'd asked. So I sat at your kitchen table and rode the high pasture with you and helped you at branding for 8 years, loving you and telling myself it was only friendship. And yesterday I made the worst joke of my life. I told the woman I had loved for 8 years that no man would ever tame her, when the man I am had been tamed by her since the second year I knew her. I'm sorry, Honor, if you would even consider letting me say to you, now, what I should have said years ago. I would be your husband, Honor Treadwell, and I would count it the greatest blessing of my whole quiet life. Tell me I am not too late." Honor Treadwell stood in her doorway in the cold dawn and looked at me for a long moment with those red-rimmed gray eyes. And then her composure broke at last, and she put her hands to her face, and she said through her hands, "You stupid man. You stupid, stupid man. I have been waiting for you to say that for 7 years. We were married before the first hard snow of that winter, the two of us, the quiet bachelor and the woman the valley swore would never marry. And Bear Ridge had a great deal to talk about for some time afterward, because it turned out that the two people the valley had most certainly given up on had given up on themselves for no good reason at all, and had been loving each other the whole long while. And I will tell you what 8 wasted years and one foolish joke and one quietly courageous answer taught me, and that I have remembered every day of the long good life Honor and I had together after. Love hides sometimes in the very plainest sight. It can sit across a kitchen table from you for 8 years, and you will call it friendship, because to call it what it is would frighten you to death. And the great mercy, when at last it is named, is how very willing it is to forgive every wasted year. Honor answered my fool's joke with the truth because she could not bear the silence one more day, and she rode away because she had to, and she let me catch her at dawn because she had been hoping, all her brave solitary life, that someone would. I almost missed her. The only thing that saved me was that I was at last quiet enough to hear what she had really said. And she had said 3 small words across a fence rail, everything.